Great. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. My name is 𝐭𝐤𝐬𝐬 with GreenSpark Solar. We're excited to share all the details about going solar for your business. I've got Doug Weishaar on the call with us today. He is one of our most experienced solar specialists in the C&I arena. He's been with us for over 14 years. He currently leads our commercial industrial sales team. And he's responsible for hundreds of local businesses going solar, but some notable names that you might recognize is Cornell University and Rochester Regional Health. He's going to cover a lot of details today. I know we only have a short time with all of you, so if you want us to stop and dig in deeper or clarify anything that we covered today, don't be shy. Drop those questions in the chat. I'll be checking those out and monitoring that. And then if you want to set up time to discuss your project details or specific questions you have one-on-one, our team will be following up after this webinar to work through those with you. So I'm going to turn it over to Doug.
Thank you for the very nice introduction. Before I jump in here, I just did want to remind everybody of what Kelsey just said about the questions. If questions come up during the webinar, feel free to throw them in the chat. If they're on topic, Kelsey can interrupt me and we can dive into that a little deeper. And then the rest of them we'll tackle as we get to the end of the end of the presentation. And as Kelsey said, I know we got a short window here, and I saw many of the people that logged in. I know a lot of these folks, they know I can be a little long-winded. So I'm going to do my best to stay on topic here. And again, with those questions, if there's something we want to dive into more, let me know and I'll cut out other stuff as necessary. For those of you that aren't familiar with GreenSpark, we are a Rochester-based developer and installer of solar and other electrification technologies, including storage and EV. We've been in business over 23 years at this point, and we've done just about all of it in the solar world. So we've got a lot of experience. We've got a crew, or several crews anyway, that focus specifically on the residential space. We also have a very large commercial and industrial team and an EPC group that focuses on building larger scale solar. So we're pretty well prepped to handle any part of the solar world that you might have questions on. Before we get into the financing and the incentives and some of the stuff that I was hoping to talk about today, just wanted to talk a little bit about, why are we talking about this? You're on this call, so there's probably a reason that drove you here. But we've seen a little bit of a change over time, and on what we're hearing is why people are investigating solar. I think historically, it's probably been a lot of people that were, really interested in clean energy and energy independence, and a lot of taking control over your costs for the electricity. More recently, in addition to that, we're also hearing a lot of pushes from companies that are part of a supply chain that have mandates or requirements to go solar. We're also hearing a lot from companies that their own employees or their customers are sort of demanding or asking for them to be more focused on renewable energy and clean energy. So there's a million great reasons to go solar, and we're going to go through some of the really good ones coming up next with some of these incentives that are out there. But I would urge everybody to think about it and think about the realities of reducing your carbon footprint and working with clean energy, which, as you'll see, costs less than doing what we're all doing now. So before we get into everything, I just wanted to talk about some of the incentives and why it's such a great financial decision to go solar right now. There's a ton of great incentives that are out there right now that can significantly reduce, if not eliminate, the entire cost. You can cover up to 100% of the cost of going solar if you're eligible for all of the incentives that are out there right now. And I did want to go through a couple of the ones we're going to talk about today, but I wanted to preface that with I'm sure everybody's aware of the uncertainty that the current federal administration has caused with some of the changes that they're making in Washington. If anybody has any specific questions on that, please feel free to ask them. We'll do our best to answer them. But right now, everything's in a little bit of a state of flux. There's a lot of things being looked at. There's been some funding pauses and things along those lines. We feel very strongly that all that stuff's going to be worked out in the very short term. And so we're confident that we can get you through a project and still be able to get the incentives as they're listed today, or whatever the modified version is. I would say this is not cause for pausing your interest in solar. It's just something that we have to work through. And quite frankly, if you started today, by the time we would get to the point where you would even be considering getting under contract, it's probably several months away, where we should have all this stuff worked out by then. But I wish I did, but I do not have a crystal ball that will tell me exactly what everything will be. That said, what's currently available by law is a federal investment tax credit, right? And that's equal to 30% of the cost of going solar. So everybody that is a taxable entity or a non-taxable entity is able to take advantage of that, either through a tax credit on your taxes or a direct pay through the IRS. The direct pay is for non-for-profit entities. There are also some bonus credits that you can get to increase that tax credit from 30% up to 40%, or maybe even 50%. The one we're going to talk about today, because it's a known entity, which is energy communities. If you're within the map boundaries of what they've designated as energy communities, you can get a 10% bonus credit on your project. So you get 40% tax credit. The other one that's going to be coming real soon, and we're pretty sure by the end of this year we're going to be able to meet the requirements, and that's for domestic content. And so if you have what they mandate by year for content percentage, and you can verify it with manufacturers' letters of certification, you can get another 10% bonus credit, or one in lieu of the other. You can take energy community or domestic content, or potentially both. So in addition to that, on the tax side, there is, like everything we buy for our businesses, the equipment is eligible for depreciation. A couple cool things about solar, though. Solar's makers write-down schedule is pretty short, right? So solar has an expected life, or warranted life, of 25 years, expected life of 35 or 40 years. The write-down schedule is only a 5-year schedule. In addition to that, for this year, for 2025, so the project would have to be completed, you're eligible for up to 40% bonus depreciation, or if your project gets completed in 2026, you'd be eligible for 20% bonus depreciation. And for those of you that may not be familiar with the bonus portion of the depreciation, just means you hurry up. So you can write down the system 40% if it's built this year, all in the first year. So you're just hurrying up getting your depreciation money on the front end. But again, that 5-year schedule is pretty short, and it's all going to be coming right back to your business. In addition to that, NYSERDA, through the New York Sun program, is offering incentives. Their incentives are based on the size of your system, and that money can come right off the top of your project. We have listed on your screen here the 25 cents a watt up to 750 kW. There is another program that's for systems larger than that. That program is currently at 17.5 cents a watt with the prevailing wage incentive that you would get for that. So projects of all sizes are eligible for incentives. And then the last incentive we're going to be talking about today is the REAP program, which is the Rural Energy for America program that's administered by the USDA. And that program allows for grants to help offset the cost of your solar project. Okay, so that said, I just want to run through a couple of examples, then we'll get into the rest of the financing information that we're all here for. So I've got a sample system size here, and we're going to run it through a couple of different scenarios of which incentives might apply to it and what that does to the actual cost. So this system is a system that's pretty common in size for a lot of businesses that are doing a rooftop installation. It's big, but it's not, doesn't require a massive warehouse roof to account for it. This is a 440 kW system, which doesn't mean a lot to probably a lot of people on the call, but in terms of savings, this system can generate $45,000 to $50,000 a year of electricity bill savings. So pretty significant. And whether that's 25% of your bill or 50% of your bill or 100% of your bill is sort of depends on how much you're using, but it sort of doesn't matter. It's a pretty significant chunk. And we can go larger if we need to, or we can go smaller if we need to. So that system, just taking a look at the numbers, that's about a $900,000 system, right? So right off the top of that cost, that would be eligible for about $110,000 of NYSERDA funding. So we as the contractor, or I don't want to say someone else, but potentially someone else could take that right off the top of your cost, right? Instead of you paying us and then following up with the state and filling out all their paperwork and waiting to get reimbursed, we'll just take care of all that for you. We offer a completely turnkey service, so we'll take it right off the top. You don't have to pay any of it. We'll take care of collecting it. Once that system gets installed, everybody is eligible, as we were just talking about, for the 30% ITC or investment tax credit, and then the equipment depreciation. So what you're looking at is a system that starts out at just about $900,000. After you get your incentives back, so you're talking within 1 year of the installation or less, you're down to $304,000, $305,000 for the system cost. So maybe almost 70% of the cost of the actual system and installation comes back through the rebates. So we were talking about the REAP program. The REAP program also provides incentives in addition to the ones that we just saw. They are stackable. Currently, so REAP has an application window that's open right now that'll be closing. I don't remember the date, but it's in March. It's probably too late to design and write a grant. They're pretty in-depth grants that you have to write in terms of the application for that one. So we'd be looking at the next window, which is in July, Q3 of this year. Right now, that program is offering grants for up to 50% of your cost, capped at $1 million of grant funds. And I would say, here's my little Doug asterisk. I would say there's been some talk about potentially reducing that to a 25% grant. And so with that, I believe that's what we're going to show on the next slide in terms of what the incentives look like. So we're hoping that it'll stay at 50%, but if it does go down to 25%, as you'll see, it's still a smoking financial deal. In addition, I just did want to point out one other thing. We're going to be talking about some of our financing partners, but the USDA does have loan guarantees that are available for anybody that's eligible for a REAP grant. And so if you wanted to do your loan through a USDA provider or through your own bank, you can do that and you can get a loan guarantee. And I think you can get up to 75% of the project cost through a loan through that program. I haven't put an application through that in several years, but we can direct you and point you to the people that have all the information at one of the local banks here if you're interested. So REAP eligibility. When you're looking at New York State, everything that's in green means you're in an eligible area, right? The second part of the qualification is you have to be an ag producer. You have to be an agricultural producer that at least 50% of your income comes from agricultural activities, or you can be what's defined as a rural small business. So if you're in any of those green zones and by your NAICS code, you qualify under the SBA guidelines. So the Small Business Administration publishes a list for every NAICS code. Every company has a NAICS code, and it'll tell us if you're under this amount of employees or if you're under this volume of dollars of business, you will qualify. So it's pretty easy to find out if you qualify for the REAP. And as you're about to see, it can be pretty fruitful, no pun intended, if you do. So here's that same system we were just looking at. 440 kW rooftop, again, saving $45,000 to $50,000 a year in electricity costs. Is about $900,000 to start. We've got that NYSERDA incentive we talked about. We've got the federal investment tax credit we talked about. We've got the depreciation, which we talked about. And then we're going to add in a 25% REAP grant in this case for another $225,000. So you're taking that $900,000 system. And again, within 1 year of building the project, your net cost is $80,000, and you're going to save $50,000 of electricity that year. So it's like paid for itself, right? That was pretty quick. So the REAP program can be very financially compelling to add to your project, and we've had several customers use it, and they end up with net zero or very close to net zero costs on a project.
Doug, just to clarify, w- the business entity doesn't necessarily need to figure that out themselves. Your team will help them do that in the initial consultation, right?
That is correct. We'll take care of doing a pre-qualification for REAP. If you decide that you do want to move forward through a project, we also take care of writing the grant application. We just need some input from the customer in order to get all the documents filled out and signed and whatnot. But again, as I think I mentioned in the beginning of the call, we like to offer our service completely turnkey. So it's very little burden on the customer in terms of making sure they can get all these incentives for the project.
Great, thanks. Someone just had wondered about that.
Great, thanks, Kelsey. Okay, so bonus credits. We talked about this a little bit. I just wanted to touch on the energy community adder. So in addition to that 30% investment tax credit that we've been talking about, you can get an additional 10%, so bumping it up to 40 if you're in one of these pink or green areas. We've got a snapshot here of most of central and western New York in the Finger Lakes region. So if you're in any of those counties, towns, areas, you do qualify for this under the current rules. So what does that mean? We were just looking at that project that got all the way down to $80,000. You throw that 10% extra tax credit in there, and your net cost is less than zero. So it's like they're paying you to do solar. So I expect all of you to call and find out if we can pay you to go solar. All right. So it's pretty amazing, right? So if that's not compelling enough, like, how about we can do it and you don't have to take a penny out of your pocket? We can. We've got several financing options, but two of our most popular options and two that fit the bill for most all customers are a traditional solar loan. We work with a local community bank, and we have a product set up with them for our customers that allows them to borrow up to 100% of the project costs on a loan that has multiple terms, fairly easy process. We will help with the paperwork administration of that as well, but it's like anything we've all done before, where you go into the bank and apply for a loan, except you don't actually have to go in anymore. The other product we have is a lease to own product. And this can be a great solution for many customers too. But what we've found is specifically folks that have that are a taxable entity but don't have any tax appetite, right? So maybe your tax appetite is all tied up in some carry forward losses or some projects that you've done in the past, or projects that you're doing in the near future, and you just don't have any appetite left to take advantage of all those incentives. The lease to own product allows you to have the bank take the tax incentives on behalf of the project, and they'll roll over a lower monthly payment to you in lieu of those tax credits. It's a fairly short lease, and the 100% intention, the bank doesn't want to own it. They want it to be a lease to own, and it's either a 6 or a 7 year lease to own term. So I talked a little bit about this, but again, a traditional loan, a solar loan, with our product, up to $1 million with no money out of pocket. You're more than welcome to put some money in if you want to reduce your payment or reduce your term or both. Flexible loan terms, for all of us who've ever had to take out an equipment loan, the terms are usually not very flexible. It's very short. You have to put a significant chunk of change in. In this case, you can get away with 0 in and up to a 20-year term. They have 5, 10, 15, and 20-year terms, which is pretty amazing. I haven't had anybody recently take the 20-year term, but I mean, you could do it. You could do it if you want the lowest payment. That's what it'll do for you. Yeah. So moving over to the lease to own product. Lease to own product, very similar, except for the bank is going to own it for the first 6 or 7 years. Bank, again, is going to take the tax incentive money out of it, the depreciation out of it, and they're going to roll that over into a savings on your monthly payment. And it allows you to take, in a different way, allows you to take advantage of those tax incentives if you don't have that tax appetite. So it can be very appealing. Although I will say, I've talked to a number of customers that just said, I have the tax appetite, I just don't have the time or the resources to deal with, taking care of it through my taxes. And so this is just a simple way to do that. So I did a quick side by side here, which anybody that's done financing on a project of this scale before, it was difficult for me to break this down into very few pieces. So all the details aren't here, but we're just trying to show you a sort of a side by side what these look like. So on the left shows this same system on a 7-year loan. Again, the terms you can set up as you want. If you wanted a shorter, you can do a 5-year, longer, a 10-year. 10 years been the most popular term on those solar loans. And then to the right is a 7-year lease for the same thing. And so it's just kind of going through that same thing we were looking at. What's the cost of the project? Where are the incentives? And then down at the bottom, what's your monthly payment look like under this set of circumstances? And probably as important, what's the after-tax cost of ownership through going through either of these products? So I do want to point out, I know we're talking about financing, but we do take cash too. If you want to pay cash, that's going to give you the best financial return because there is some interest that's associated with either one of these. But it's not too crazy, right? If you look at either one of these, after 7 years, your after-tax cost of ownership is still only just over half of what the project cost was. And again, don't forget this system's saving you $50,000 a year off your electricity bill, so it'll pay off what that balance is there pretty quickly. I did want to point out a couple of things just to remind everybody. If you go with the lease, bank's taking the tax credit, so you're not taking the tax credit and doing the lease. You have to be a taxable entity in order to do the lease. They can't take a tax credit on behalf of an entity that is non-taxable. Depreciation, the bank also takes. However, when you buy out your lease at the end of the year 6 or 7, whatever that small amount is that you pay to now own the system, that is eligible for depreciation. So I showed a very tiny comparatively, but amount of depreciation that you would be eligible to take. Did want to point out also that with your lease payments, those lease payments are tax deductible like anything else that you're leasing and writing off. So you would be able to have some savings on that end too. And I tried to calculate that all into the after-tax cost, assuming that everybody was in a fairly similar tax bracket. I know your situation may be different. We'd be happy if you're interested in looking at a product and we get to this stage, we'd be happy to work with your accountant or tax advisor to kind of run them through where the numbers are and let them run the numbers for you, based on your specific tax situation. So I'm going to pause for a moment. Kelsey, I just want to check in and see if we had any questions specific to any of the financing products or the incentives that we were talking about.
We just had one question come through earlier about, we shared kind of a larger, like a 441 kilowatt size.
Okay.
You mentioned you can do smaller, like, is there, I guess, how small can you go?
Yeah,
I mean, CNI?
In theory, we can go down to probably 5 or 10 panels, which would be a very small, system relative to this. But usually when we're evaluating solar for a customer, there's 2 places that you start, right? You look at the bill and you do an analysis on, how much energy you're using and what it's costing you over the course of a year or two. And we try and get a sense of like, if you use this system and you're only using $5,000 a year in savings, you'd have a whole bunch of extra savings that you really weren't going to get the value out of. I think that is an important note, like building a system that's much larger or produces much more credits than you're needing doesn't make any financial sense. In New York, the way the utilities work is when you use solar, you generate credits that can be applied against your bill or someone else's bill as long as it follows the utility rules. But they won't give you cash, right? They're not going to write you a check and say, hey, great job this year. You made a whole bunch of extra. So you want to size the system right to the cost and the usage of the business. But the other thing that you look at is, now I know how much you're spending and how much you're using in terms of energy. How big is your roof, right? We've had a lot of customers that have a very big electric load with a very small roof, right? So sometimes the size of your roof limits the size of the project, but we can make those 2 work to the best of our ability. And another point of note, we've been talking a lot about roofs. If you have ground space and you're interested in doing a ground mount, that is a totally viable option that we can do as well. It just depends on how much space and how much land you have around your building.
Cool.
I hope that addressed that question. I could go on and on, but So I wanted to just talk about these in light of like, so we talked about all these incentives. We talked about all these different ways you can finance your system. We talked about how financially advantageous it is to at a minimum look into this, but probably to go forward with doing a solar energy project. Just wanted to look at a couple of companies we've worked with recently and over the years to talk about what they were able to do, and so everyone could see a little bit different size systems. So this is a system that's about a 90 kW system. So significantly smaller, about a fifth of the system that we were looking at before. But again, right, it fits within their roof footprint, and it helps them offset their costs and start getting at least part of their energy from a clean source. I don't believe, 𝐬𝐚𝐬𝐽 would have fallen under that first example that we looked at from a financial perspective. They qualified for the the base tax credits that almost everybody's eligible for, and the NYSERDA funding. However, if we look at Cherry Lawn Fruit Farms, Cherry Lawn, this is an interesting picture. So I did this first project a long time ago that you can see on the picture, and then they expanded their building. This is a cold storage facility. And so now we're back there again. We're currently building out the rest of their roof. But Cherry Lawn did a REAP grant for their first project, and they just got approved for their second REAP grant for the second stage of their project. So significant savings, as we saw how those numbers were. They weren't exactly the same when we did the first phase of the project, but they were very similar, right? Similar incentives were available. And both of these businesses, when we looked at 𝐬𝐚𝐬𝐽 and Cherry Lawn here, they're covering a significant portion. Cherry Lawn's going to be up to 100% again of their load, which is, it's pretty amazing, right? It's you're taking that electricity bill that you pay every month, whatever they say, and you're just taking that right off your books, and then you're able to take that money and that savings that you have, and you can reinvest that back into your business in whatever fashion you find appropriate, but to make yourself more successful. Okay, and so the last one I think I have in here is Porware 𝐜𝐸𝐬𝐸. They're out in Macedon. We just did them last year, and they installed pretty much almost the same size system we were looking at. So fairly large.
I was going to say that is the system. That is the system.
That is the system. Okay. Look, that is the system that we looked at. That's what it looks like in terms of space. They have a big building, but it's not exorbitantly large. And you can see there's more of their building, and there's more parts of it that we didn't cover in solar. But when you get onto these larger roofs, I just wanted to point this out too. You'll notice we left some access pathways along the array. And so they don't have a lot of rooftop equipment at this facility, but some companies do, where you have RTUs and condensers and other parts of your HVAC system that are up on the roof. Any equipment, whether it's HVAC or not, that's on your roof that's serviceable, we were required, and it only makes sense that we would leave access pathways so that that people can get to them and do the work that they need to do. And you're usually leaving an access pathway and then about a 4 foot or more setback on each side of it, so they can do their work without tripping over the panels. We do also leave access to things that are not serviceable upon request. Sometimes people need to get to drains that are on their roof, other things. They're still accessible when the panels go over them, but if someone says we just have this drain, it's always clogged, we're constantly doing service, we can leave a cutout for that too. That said, Porware is saving almost $50,000 a year just by letting these panels sit up on their roof. They did get a REAP grant. They did take advantage of the tax incentives. They did get the NYSERDA money. So this was basically a net no cost project for them after they recoup all those incentives. Okay, so what's next? If you're interested, and I hope you are, just wanted to walk you through what the steps would be towards going solar. And you can determine at any one of these steps if it's not right for you or for your business, or it's not the right time. But step one, I alluded to this a little bit before, you're going to start with an energy analysis, right? And included in that energy analysis is a little bit of a property analysis, right? We're going to use some aerial photography to kind of get a sense of what the size of your facility is, where things are located, where the utilities are coming in, et cetera. And then we'll come up with a base level recommendation. We'll discuss that with you, revise that as necessary. Once we dial it in and say, yeah, this is what I want, this is how I want to do it, we'll start talking about, okay, now we know the cost. Let's talk about the financing options. You know, is a loan better for you? Is a lease better for you? If one of those is going to be utilized through us, we'll get you in touch with the financier. We'll help with you know, getting the paperwork done, getting the pre-approval, so everything's all set on that front. Oh, I skipped forward a step. I'm sorry. I went right from step 1 to step 3. So I've already talked about step 3. The financing can come before or after that. I usually do the final proposal and then the financing, but nevertheless, at this point, there's some decisions to be made, right? So we're going to be working on getting under contract, and when we get under contract, we have to understand some of the things that are going on. And like right now is a really good example of making sure that we put the right contract into place. So as we were talking about with some of the potential uncertainty around some of the incentives, the REAP program right now has one that has been causing a lot of people some concern, because there's a pause on the payouts, right? There's an executive order that said that agency, among others, can't pay out any money until they get the green light. They've gotten partial green lights. I know last week they had several payouts, but there's some people that have been approved for that program that are still waiting to find out, you know, when their payout date's going to be. And so what we've done to sort of alleviate the concern there is we can write a contract that says, I'm going for a REAP grant, and this contract is going to be contingent on a REAP grant. And so we're not going to spend any money other than what's required to get your REAP grant application in and approved until we get the approvals. So that way you can know going into it, hey, I've got my approval. I know how much money I'm getting. I'm ready to move forward. And now we can start spending money on additional things. Or in the event this hasn't happened to us, but in the event that you weren't awarded a REAP grant, or the REAP grant program changed drastically and it wasn't favorable in the way that you wanted it to be anymore, we can say, that's it. We're gonna wipe this contract clean, start again, and see if we can figure some other way to do this project. That said, once we have that approval, we'll get through all the final stuff with the bank. We'll get all that in place. You do need to have your funding sources in place for REAP, so we will do that. That doesn't really cost any money, any significant money anyway. And then we'll wait for that approval. Once we have the approval, in this case for a REAP, we'll dive right into final system designs, working with the utility company. Working with the utility company, permitting, that stuff is usually the longest part of the process. But once we have all those approvals, we'll have, you know, while we're getting those approvals, I should say we'll be ordering all the equipment. We'll be getting ready to mobilize to the site, so that as soon as we do have them, we can get out to the site. And these systems get built fairly quickly, right? Like that system sites that we looked at, that 450 kW, that's about 3 to 4 weeks of on-site work, where the whole process from the time the contract through utility work and permitting and electrical inspections and utility approvals, that probably took like 8 months, 9 months of time. But we're only there on site, and obviously when we're on site, we're going to do whatever we can to disrupt or to provide as little disruption to your business as possible. We'll pre-identify a staging area. We'll flag off an area so we make sure none of your customers or employees are coming anywhere near where we're accessing the roof or hoisting materials up. So we'll get that all worked out ahead of time. But once we're there, we'll build it, and before you know it, you'll be solar powered. Okay, so that's the end of my spiel. But I wanted to check back in with Kelsey, see if there was any questions that were still outstanding.
No new questions, but we'll give everyone a couple minutes. We can hang on for a few minutes if anyone wants to stay on and has a few more questions, or like we said at the beginning, feel free to reply to the webinar email you received with any questions you have, and we can get those responses back to you.
Absolutely. And if you're thinking that you're interested in, having the first steps done, where you're taking a look at, what you're spending and what's possible on your roof or on your property, we'd be happy to do that for you. It's obviously at no cost. Give you a preliminary proposal that'll say, here's what we think the costs are, here's what the incentives that would apply, and so you can get a sense of what the financials of a project are.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all for your time this morning. We really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy mornings, and we'll be sending a recording of this in case you want to rewatch any portions, and we'll look out for any questions you have.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.